Hi, I am Jan Smith from Louisiana, and I am so pleased to be here today and talk with you about a winning strategy for your homeschool. Now, the reason I've been asked to come here is because I've homeschooled for a long time. In fact, I am through homeschooling and now am in the years of trying to give back as a leader to make sure that the freedoms and the opportunities that I had in homeschooling my own children, that you will have and that our children and our grandchildren will have. So I'm here to talk with you about that winning strategy. First, I want to share with you my own children to show you that they really do grow up. We have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, and all but the daughter are married and have children of their own, and it's a great journey. I'm here to tell you that all of your efforts that you are putting into homeschooling your children, it is worthwhile, and you're going to be so thankful that you stuck with it, that you persevered, because there is hope. They will grow up, and so many of your dreams, maybe not all of them, but so many of your hopes and your dreams will come to fruition, and that the people, the godly men and women that you want to see them become, it is so rewarding. The first time that I sat through a service with my son playing worship for that congregation, I thought of all the years of piano that I had listened to and suffered through and reveled through, that here he is using that same gift to the glory of God. It's a rewarding journey, but it's a long process to get there, and I want to help you have a winning strategy. One of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to renew your vision. In Proverbs 29, verse 18, it says that without vision, the people perish. Now, there were days that I thought some of my people were in danger of perishing, if you know what I mean. But the vision of my homeschool journey was also in danger of perishing. It seemed like every spring I would get to the end of the year and I would think, I'm not sure I can do this again. I would go to a homeschool conference and renew my vision. I hope that your participation in this online conference can be that renewal for you of being re-inspired that what you're doing, moms, that hard work of the day in and day out, not only wiping their nose in their bottom and listening to that story again, but the resolving conflict amongst your children and cooking that next meal, washing those dishes again, that it is a labor that is worthwhile. So I hope that you will renew your vision. Some of you need to reevaluate the methods that you're using. In James 1:5, it says that if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, and he will freely give you wisdom. So I'm encouraging you, if what you're doing right now looks like this slide where it's a battle and it's a struggle day in and day out, well, maybe you need to change your method. You know, there are so many online classes about the approaches to homeschool, of which there are many. None of them are the right way to homeschool. Maybe you need to consider changing the approach that you're using. Maybe the learning style that fits your child is not the learning style that the curriculum you're using is suited for. And maybe you're trying to do something that is a style that you're personally not comfortable with. It's worth you getting to know and evaluating the methods that you're using. Maybe you need to just refresh the mood and the environment of your home. Here during the coronavirus days, we're all home more than ever because homeschoolers are not used to being home every day, all day. And so maybe refreshing the mood and the environment of your home, not just the decor. Maybe you need to paint a room, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 14 that says, but thanks be to God who always leads us in triumph in Christ and manifests through us the sweet aroma of the knowledge of Him in every place. Mom, is the knowledge of Christ coming out of you? Is that the sense that you're giving off? It says that we are the fragrance of Christ to God among those who are being saved. And so for your children, when you come in the room, it needs to be a pleasantness and a sweetness. Now, maybe you come into the room and they're caught doing something they shouldn't be doing, but they may not be so happy about that. But in general, you as the mom, remember that you represent Christ, and that the fragrance and the aroma of Christ, that you have the opportunity of setting that tone within your home, refresh the mood and the environment of your homeschool journey. So, I know that the number one question that I am asked throughout as a veteran homeschool mom is, what curriculum should I use? Now, my recommendation is that you begin with the end in mind. And so that means asking the question, in the end, what does it mean to be an educated person? And so some of you have college degrees, others of you don't. But when you think of someone who is an educated person, what characterizes that person? So, again, beginning with the end in mind means, in my opinion, when I think of someone who is truly educated, they have a wide base of knowledge about a wide variety of things, such as being able to read well and to write well. Now, when you think of reading, sometimes right now you may be thinking of Bob books. Others of you are thinking of a list of the classics for your teenagers. But being a well-read person means somebody who loves reading, who they turn to books to understand and to know. Now, if you have a child that thus far has not had the vision of what it means to love reading, I want to encourage you to introduce them to a wide base of types of reading. You know, maybe your favorite type of reading that you're using in your school is a historical book. But maybe your child would rather read a fantasy, and you don't care for fantasy. Introduce them to a wide base of knowledge in the types of literature that's out there. Open your mind to be different. And if you want a child that's truly well educated, then they're going to need to learn to write, and to write well. One of the best ways of teaching a child to write well is to expose them to great writing through books. Read aloud with them. Now, also, don't be afraid, because you consider yourself not to be a writer, to give your child the opportunity to write. You know, they really don't need a paper that's perfectly corrected. They need lots of opportunities to finish a story, for you to leave it open-ended, to not pass judgment on their writing, but to give them the opportunity to write, free of a grade, free of someone saying this is right and this is wrong, because that starts to shut down their desire to write. We want our children to be men and women of influence. That means they need to learn how to write without fear. Now, you want them to have an appreciation of a wide, just array of topics in life, such as music. You know, I grew up loving music. In fact, I play the piano and I sing, but I really was uneducated in terms of, I knew how to read music, but I really couldn't have told you what blues sounded like. I had listened to almost no classical music other than the music that I played on the piano. I want to encourage you in the same way that when you begin to feed your child real food, that you would introduce foods one at a time and give them several exposures to get used to that flavor or that texture of food. Do that with music. Let them listen to jazz, to classical, to rock. You know, they need to understand, what does some different types of music sound like. Maybe you don't like country. Maybe your child would. introduce them to some great country classics, even the big band sound from the 20s, Southern gospel, Zydeco, all types of music, even high church. Your child needs to know, what does it mean to have a rap song? What does that mean? For them to be truly educated, they need to have a wide appreciation for culture, for travel, for careers that are out there. They need to be exposed to a wide variety of things. When we started homeschooling back in the 80s, there was so little available. You didn't have Spotify that you could just instantly access any type of music, but it's available to you now. You didn't have the internet where you could show them art from all the different ages, but we do now. So don't be afraid to expose your children to a wide variety of styles in art, in music, in culture. You know, I remember when we did a unit study on Greek gods, on the mythologies of the Greeks, because I knew it existed, but I knew nothing about it. And did I want to expose my children to falsehood and to these things that they truly believed and worshiped at that day? Yes, not so that they would believe them, but because I wanted them to not be ignorant of the references to this in literature and in society. I wanted to learn about it myself. And so, did we spend a lot of time on it? No. But I wanted them to have an understanding that this is a part of history. It's a part of culture. And I encourage you as a mom to not be afraid to expose your children to a wide array of knowledge. I want you to make sure that they understand how to function in the world. And I laugh when I look at this picture. If you had told me that my children would travel around the world in the ways that they had, I would have laughed, even though I told one of my sons one day when he was caught. We lived just right off of a street in downtown, and one day my son went down Main Street with his boots. Really, it was his brother's bigger boots. They were way too big for him. He had on a diaper, and he had his dog in the wagon, and there he went down Main Street. And I remember making the statement to him, one day you're going to bike across France. You have such an adventuresome spirit. I didn't know that they would really do that. And the world is a smaller place. When I grew up, I hardly traveled 40 miles from where I lived until I was in college. And yet my children have traveled the world, and it's an exciting thing. You want to equip them so that if God does call them to do something that's way beyond what you ever thought or imagined, that they're equipped to do that they understand the basics of how to follow GPS, that they know how to access information, even if they've never studied it, quote, in your curriculum, that they are not afraid to function in this great big world. So basic things like how to apply for a job, how to even know what jobs are out there. You know, that's not in many curriculums. Basic understandings of politeness. Now, this is a very old phone that you see pictured here. And learning how to answer the phone may not be such a big deal now, but knowing how to properly function in society, how to look someone in the eye and shake hands, how to talk with an adult, no matter if they're president of the bank or whatever that person is, that they have communication skills, that they are equipped and ready to function in talking with a wide variety of people. And if you keep thinking that I keep referring to a wide variety or a wide base of knowledge, that's what I want to do. I don't want you to be limited to just your curriculum. I want you to begin to think that you have the knowledge it takes and the skills it takes to teach your children. When we started off teaching, we didn't have curriculum to choose from. You know, we had to decide, what do we really want for our children? And to begin to think about that. My husband and I would pray each year, what do we really want our children to learn this year? And we would talk with them, what are you most interested in? We would think, what types of things for each child do we see them moving toward? And we would try to gear some part of their education that direction. Every year we wanted them to have spiritual understanding, teaching them to have the knowledge that it comes from the scriptures. We challenge you to make sure that the Word of God is part of your curriculum every year. In fact, every day, because we want them to have understanding. We want them to be perceptive and to be able to understand people. This was an important thing for us, because as my husband, Dr. Smith, and I really began to understand ourselves, we realized we had not been taught. Sure, we had psychology in college, but to really have the understanding of people that we want, that takes lots of conversation and not being afraid to study. Next. You have to have the ability to think and ask questions, to be discerning, and we want you to be able to teach your children that. And that means really helping them to understand what makes them and what makes others. These are 3 different books that I encourage you to study yourselves and to maybe study along with your children. If you've not read them, make sure that you do, because these books were influential in myself and many, many others, helping to understand who I am and to accept who I am in God, because God created each one of us very uniquely. And these books helped me to understand. Personality Plus was a game changer for me. There were 4 girls in my family, and each one of us represented the 4 personality types. I used to think, why can't I be like my sister in one way or the other? And when I read Personality Plus, I understood that God created me differently than them, and that He didn't expect me to be like them, that He wanted me to be the best I can be. It helped me to accept my children and the way God created them, and to understand them, that it wasn't something I had done to them, that they came out being who they are, and that it was my job to work with God to help shape and form them and equip them to be the best they can be. The 5 love languages is something that helps to explain how we receive and give love. It also is a critical insight into helping your children actually feel loved by you. Recently I read The Road Back to You, and I wish I had read this when my children were young, because it gives even more insight into the particular ways that our children are created and that we ourselves are created by God. Is it the Word of God? No, but it sheds wisdom on our lives, and it helps the scriptures come to life, because we're commanded to love one another and to accept one another as we are accepted by God. And the more we can do that through the lens of wisdom and understanding, the better off we will be. So we want our children to be able to recognize trends. Here we see the whole concept of gender fluidity. Now, I knew Bruce Jenner when he was an Olympic superstar, and he was just a hunky-hunk man. To think of him thinking that he needs to be a woman is just heart-wrenching to me. But our children need to understand and recognize, because they're going to be exposed to it. They need to see that. I laugh when I see the little cartoon creatures here. I was asked to judge several years ago now a simple pumpkin contest, and when I at Halloween, and a pumpkin decorating contest, and when I got there I thought, okay, I don't know what these yellow creatures are, but obviously the kids are into it, because there were lots of yellow pumpkins with googly eyes. And so even the Pokemon and other things, you need to just be aware, and the kids need to be aware. Even if they don't participate in it, don't shelter your children to the point where they don't know what is going on culturally. We need to understand and not be afraid of what is happening in our culture. Now, in order to grow in these ways, we need to be on the path ourselves. And, you know, it's exciting how we as women continue to grow, and that's God's desire and his intention. Moms, you don't have to know it all. You continue to be on the path yourself. You know, Ephesians 4:15, it says that we need to grow up in all aspects into Christ. And that is the truth. And I call it a contented discontent, that as we grow and our children grow, that we stay in our spirit, not frustrated with ourselves. It's so hard to give ourselves the grace that we need, but to know that we continue to grow. I look back at when our children were small, and how it was a hard time for me. I didn't love it when my children were little. My husband was in medical training, and I was often by myself with them, and those days are long. I was reminded of that in the last 2 weeks when my son and his wife and their three little girls, 5 and under, and how I'm used to a pretty rich and varied existence in my adult years. And I interact with a lot of interesting people and do a lot of challenging things. And those 10 days with my little granddaughters reminded me of the simple times when we went to the park, when we would swing on the swing, when we would sit and look at the bugs. And I remember going, oh yeah, this was hard for me. But you need to have a contentment. Even if you're discontent and you want to grow, you want to change, you want to keep seeing them grow and mature and do more exciting things, be content where you are. Because when they get to be teenagers and it's wild and crazy and there's a lot of pressure, no, I'm not talking about just getting supper done. I'm talking about big things that your kids may end up doing. You're going to look back at those simple times and go, wow, that was easy. So even though it's hard, be content in whatever phase your children are in and keep growing. Now, resources. We have so many resources available to us. This is a picture of a library. Don't forget about your library. There are such valuable resources there. And financial concerns, you might think, oh, I don't have money for all those books that I want to have. That God has provided that, even through your library. I use things like these 3 read aloud guides, people who've committed their lives to knowing about books, quality books. It can be so overwhelming when you go into a library and there are so many choices. So find a resource book like Sarah McKenzie's The Read Aloud Family or The Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease. Mine that I used all the time was Gladys Hunt for Honey for a Child's Heart. And I used that like my Bible. I would take it to the library and give it to the children's librarian and say, I need 20 books out of this section. And she could pull them in a heartbeat. And I could really utilize somebody else helping me make decisions. Now you can even make those selections online and have those librarian have them pulled and ready for you when you show up at the library. Some of you can afford to just order them, and I recommend that. You can order a lot of these books and build your own library, but use resources to help you know how to best use your time with these children as you read aloud. Now, there's so many other things that you can use in educating your children that don't cost you a dime, that are not part of a curriculum. There are TED Talks for your teenagers. They need to listen to some TED Talks. You don't even have to preview them all. It will expose them to people that are speaking and have ideas that somebody else has already vetted and thought, this is worthwhile listening to. So let your kids listen to some of those things. There is Shepherd software that has games in every level. And I'm not talking about video games that they get sucked into and can never finish. These are educational games that are safe and that they play alone on your computer. And maybe while you're working with someone that's a struggling reader, that you can let some of the other children play a Shepherd software game, whether it's math or geography, or maybe watch a Rick Steen's travel log and learn as though they're going all over the world. So there are many, many free materials, and there right now during coronavirus, there are more than ever, and there are lists and lists and lists of free things to help you. We used organizations such as 4-H and Scouts, essay contests, science fairs, all sorts of social studies fairs and speech and debate, choir, band, orchestra, youth theater, all kinds of opportunities that are out there. Use that as part of your school with your teens, even with your elementary age children. We had a son that was a photographer, and he entered many competitions with his photography. Ultimately, you have to seek to live a disciplined life. If you're thinking, this sounds overwhelming, this is too much, it does. It takes discipline. And I want to encourage you to live a disciplined life. In 1 Timothy 4, verse 7, it says, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. And so I encourage you to have a routine. In our day, we started at 7 o'clock when they got older, that every day Roger would do a devotion before he left. This gave me accountability to get the kids up, and it helped him to set the tone in teaching those teenagers, because it gets hard. They have plans, they have things to do, but at 7 in the morning, everybody's home and everybody's available. And they did cleaning, and they did routines. They had healthy habits of putting away clutter. Make that part of your school day, training them life skills, because when they move out, they're going to have their own apartment. Even in college, more than likely, they'll live in some apartment style, and they need to understand cooking and cleaning and what to do. So I want to encourage you to have healthy habits, to exercise. They need to exercise, and so do you. Looking back, this is one thing that I sacrificed during the years that we were building a house and they were showing horses and playing baseball and in a theater production, and I stopped exercising, and I thought this was something that I needed to I was being selfish in doing exercise. But I encourage you, make that a part of your day with your children. And good nutrition, they need to learn. That's an important part of school, is providing healthy food for your family, whether you purchase it or whether you make it, whether they help you make it. Make good nutrition a part of their training. So, rid yourself of things. You might need to put away some Netflix, your phone, some other things, Facebook, that you need to rid yourselves of things that are distracting you from the main thing. And even news, some people get addicted to the news, that it is a harder and higher way. But in Hebrews 12:1, it says that we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, that we need to lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and run with endurance the race that's set before us. It is a harder and higher way. It's day in and day out with your children. It is a real sacrifice that you are making to invest in the life of your children. But know that that investment will come back. You will be able to understand, and it will reap dividends. And as you rid yourself of these things, just like on the dangerous journey, he had to lay aside things. You're on a journey in this homeschooling things, and there are things right now that you may lay aside. For me, I laid aside doing some weddings, for playing the piano, for some of the things that I had done when the children were young. And I'm not saying that you have to do that, but it is a short time. When the children, after they graduated, my last one graduated, I began to pick up some things after they graduated that I played in a jazz band, and I did several other things that I didn't do when the kids were home. I did more outside teaching. I started teaching at a drug and alcohol facility for women in our area. And God just opened many, many doors that I didn't have time for. My husband and I traveled. I joined the garden club, and I had a state position where I planned travel trips. There is life after homeschooling, but during those years, it's hard. So I encourage you to journey with others. Make sure that you join a local support group. You know, it's important to have others that are doing the same thing that you do. I'm not saying that everybody in your life needs to be a homeschooler, but you need to have some that can relate to the particular challenges and stresses of being a homeschool mom. So join a support group, not just online, but in person, people that can be there with you. Join with others that are on that journey. So begin with the end in mind, because some of you are just getting started. Others are almost through. Don't throw in the towel. Those high school years to me are the most rewarding. Those are the fruit years where you get to enjoy the fruit of your labor of all those years of training and teaching. High schoolers can be a huge help. Now, they can be a challenge, and you certainly can't control them, but you can influence them. And I want to challenge you to build that relationship. Give over more and more responsibility to those high schoolers. Let them be independent, but maintain relationship, because that's what you're going to have in the end. You're going to have relationship. So begin with that end in mind and move toward that goal. Tap into resources and organizations. You won't do all of these things that I've mentioned, but many of them might be just the thing that makes the difference for you in being able to vary things and to help you to decide what to do next. Use some resources and organizations, and determine to have a disciplined life for you personally and for the life of your homeschool. So you can do this, Mom. I'm encouraging you to stay the course, develop a strategy, and don't just think that the answer is in the next curriculum. Take some of that control for yourself. Now, there are many, many podcasts that are out there. One of them is mine. It's called A Woman in Her Home, and I encourage you to look for that. It's not launched yet, but it is in the phase of getting ready to launch. And there are many, many podcasts. There are many, many situations to help encourage you throughout the week to have some time where you be encouraged and continue to learn and grow. So I hope that you found this inspiring, that you can homeschool your children, and it's worth your every effort. Look toward the end. This is a faith journey, and I encourage you to be faithful day in and day out and trust God with your results. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope that you will continue to listen to the other speakers that are in this online conference and be encouraged.